Hi and welcome. I'm Brad Kuvan, Editorial Director of Metal Forming Magazine at the Precision Metal Forming Association. And this is our Before the Floor segment where we're highlighting FABTECH 2023 exhibitors as we head toward the show in Chicago in September. So I'm here today with Jim Finnerty. Jim is the product manager at Wintriss Controls Group. We're going to get some perspective from Jim on the state of the metal forming industry, learn about some new technology developments at Wintriss, and of course, find out firsthand from Jim specifically what's on tap for Wintriss at FABTECH this year. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Let's jump right in. So tell us some of the market factors that you're seeing impacting metal formers and how they're adopting Wintriss technology and products.
Well, you know what? A lot of it goes back to the pandemic and the resulting labor shortage. The shortage of skilled labor has been exacerbated by a lot of experienced people retiring. So our customers, our metal stampers, are scrambling for ways to make presses easier to run, and especially easier to set up, because that's where most of the skill is involved. I mean, anybody can press a button and watch it run, but it's getting it running, getting everything properly set up. So we've seen a big uptake in demand for our products that automate setup. Like controls that automatically set the shot height, automatically set the counterbalance. And we've spent a great deal of time working with other manufacturers of ancillary equipment, things like servo feeds and lubrication systems, where we could interface them to our controls. So rather than a new operator having to remember how to set up a whole bunch of different things, when they load the die, we automatically bring in all the settings they need from one spot. While all this is happening, on top of that, the dies are getting more complicated. There's more and more that's expected to happen inside progressive dies. We're seeing welding, assembly, and just configurable dies a lot more complicated. So anything we can do to sort of make it easier on the operator and sort of reduce the learning curve is in pretty high demand right now.
So then, are there particular technology developments that you want to point to that are relatively recent that help with this automated setup and supporting the operators?
Sure, yeah, I'll give you one that's not so recent, but it's become huge for us, and it's one of those things that we did a while ago, and I don't want to say forgot about it, but it wasn't really a feature or a capability that we really pushed, and that's the ability to administrate the controls remotely. So we have a feature in our control where somebody that is on our customer's network can log into the control itself and actually run the control remotely. They can do everything except load a new tool number, because ancillary equipment can operate. We make sure that somebody at the press does that. But if there's an application issue or a programming question, the subject matter expert can get right at it. And that's had a huge impact on our customers. So they've been using that. Some of the other things we've done is we recently added a bunch of complex, I don't want to call them complex, let's call them advanced features in our control. Now, at the same time, we're adding advanced features, and we want to keep it as easy to use as possible. Wintriss controls we've always prided ourselves on making controls that are very easy to use. So by adding advanced features, we still had to keep it that way. And the way we did that was the way we've always done it, is we went to our customers. See, when we're developing new features or a new product, our engineers are working on that thing sometimes years in advance, every day, and they get very used to using it. They'll sort of build in shortcuts that make things easier for them, but not necessarily easier on the end user. So they lose perspective. We lose perspective on, is this thing easy to use, or are we just really used to it? So what we did before we implemented these features is we brought in customers. We brought in experienced Wintriss customers. We brought in people that understood the metal stamping industry, but not necessarily our controls. Did a bunch of focus groups, tweak things, move things around to ensure that it was as easy to use as possible. We've also taken advantage of a lot of the, increased computer horsepower in the controls now, where you can press a button and the manual pops up on the screen. And not just, the manual with a hard to read table of contents. Whatever is on the screen, that page of the manual will appear at the touch of a button. So we've added a lot of things to make it easier to use. Also, as you know, we're really big in die protection, sensor monitoring, and those sorts of things. And we looked at where our customers, who are also new to that, the labor shortage isn't limited to just setup people. It's engineering personnel at our facilities, tool makers, manufacturing engineers. Well, some people are implementing sensors for the first time, and they're making, I guess what you could call rookie mistakes. So one of the things we were able to do with our new features was we were able to make die protection monitoring more forgiving and more mistake-proof without really giving up any true protection. So we've done a lot of things like that as well.
Excellent. So following on that then, so what will we see at your booth at FABTECH? I assume some of what you just discussed and maybe some other things as well.
Yeah, what we've done is we've added a couple of suites of new features to our flagship controller, the SmartPack Pro. And we've done it to die protection and also the lowly programmable limit switch. Our programmable limit switch has remained unchanged for virtually, I don't know, 30 years, maybe more. But we've added a lot more capability based on things our customers need to do. For example, instead of having, an output actuate every single cycle as if you're telling a feeder to feed or a part blow-off solenoid to actuate, we give our users the ability to precisely actuate an output every X number of strokes to control gagging operation or dies that require multiple feeds and then a cutoff station to be brought in. We've added the ability for multiple on-offs per cycle to control very, very precisely. We even added programmable limit switch capability that is only actuated when certain other trigger events occur. For example, I was working with a stamper earlier in the week that runs a high-speed press, and it takes this press about 25 strokes to come up to full speed. Well, the die is designed to make good parts at full speed, not while it's ramping up. So what we were able to do was trigger a programmable limit switch that diverts 25 parts every time the machine starts up, and only actuates after the machine stops. So we're able to segregate those bad parts. That was a manual operation where the operator would put a diverter gate, move the gate over when he felt it was up to full speed. Now we're able to precisely control that. Another use for that is we can trigger off of a sensor fault. So one of our customers was monitoring stripper position at bottom dead center to detect slugs pulled up on top of the strip. And when they did pull a slug, the die protection system would stop the press. However, there was a pulled slug smushed down onto a part. So there were one or two parts under the stripper at that time that are going to be rejected for cosmetic reasons. And rather than have to look for those parts, what we were able to do was every time we see one of those stripper sensors fault, we wait 5 strokes for those parts to start to become cut off. And then we actuate a diverter gate for 5 strokes to divert the possible bad parts that were under the stripper into a separate bin for later inspection. So these capabilities were all added into the programmable limit switch. Now, in terms of die protection, we added the capability to only monitor certain events. Normally, events like material buckle are monitored throughout the stroke. And anytime there's a material buckle, we know there's a problem, we want to stop the machine. Well, if the sensor is misapplied and say it's a little too close to the strip, maybe the strip will jump up when the die opens and cause a nuisance stop on that sensor. What we did is we added the ability for a user to bypass that sensor during a specific window of the stroke. So when the die opens up, we know the material's not moving. We're not going to have a buckle at that point because the feed hasn't actuated. So if there's a false actuation during that time, we'll ignore it. Also, we found that on certain applications, one I dealt with recently was an end of material sensor, where a customer had selected a reflective photo sensor, a fairly weak one, not the one I would have recommended, but it was one they had, and they were aiming it at the strip. And as long as the strip was present, the light would be reflected back to the sensor, and the sensor would say the strip is there, continue to run. Well, this strip was steel, and there'd be some discoloration on it in places, and that discoloration would cause the sensor to briefly deactivate and nuisance stop the machine. So what we did for that sort of thing is we added the ability for our users to plug in a minimum actuation time. See, one of the things we found out with that particular nuisance stop, that it was always short duration, less than a second. And if the material ran out, it was going to run out for a lot more than a second. So we said, all right, if the problem persists for longer than a second, stop the machine. But if it's really short, go ahead and keep it running. And that's not dangerous to the die. That's end of material. They're going to run a few strokes after the stop anyway to run out the rest of the strip. So we were able to make things more forgiving. We've also added some flexibility. See, one of the things we do is we field requests from our customers on new features they'd like. And we don't run out and put them right in the control because it may be a one-off or something that nobody else is going to use, but we do keep track of them. And we had sort of a mishmash of die protection requests, and we found a way. We created a new sensor type called the Green Flex that allows the user to selectively incorporate different types of monitoring logic all into one sensor. So we can say, all right, this sensor has to be on at the start of the timing window. It has to turn on 3 times during this. It has to be off by the end of the timing window. So we're able to deal with more complex dies, more complex applications. And speaking of more complex applications, we've been doing a lot more integration. See, we're a controls manufacturer, and our business historically was we sell the customer the control, they hang it on the press, and if they want to more tightly integrated with their controls, they have somebody in-house that programs PLCs to do that, or they hire an integrator. Well, it's harder to get people to do that sort of work. The experienced people leaving our customers. We'd always done it some for the press manufacturers, but we've hired additional people to do the integration. And now many of the controls we sell aren't just a control, it's an integrated system that communicates with all the other systems on the machine. And that also goes back to ease of use and lower training time.
Wow, very good. So the follow-up question to that is all of this retrofittable to some of the existing SmartPack Pros in the market, some of the sensors in the market, customers that maybe didn't use your integration at the beginning, but now they're looking for maybe a little bit more support from you in that way?
Absolutely, it is. With the SmartPack Pro, the new programmable limit switch features and the new die protection features, that's a free upgrade. All an existing user has to do is call us up and ask for new firmware, and they'll get that with an existing upgrade. Some of the other stuff are added cost options, but they can all be added to existing systems. Even some of them can be added to the previous generation controls that go back to 1994. So if somebody wanted to automate the shut height, automate the counterbalance setting, they can still do that even on the older generation controls.
Excellent, very good. Okay, Jim, thank you for joining us today. Sounds like you got a lot on the ready here to talk about at FABTECH. We look forward to seeing you.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. And Wintriss is in D41118 at FABTECH. We'll see you there.
All right.
Thanks, Jim. Yep. Bye-bye.